Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Pick it up next week. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me for the next 2 hours. I'm very privileged and honored to be able to interview my friend Christopher Tyreman of the Chronicle Project. I know without a doubt that he is one of the smartest guys on the planet when it comes to the understanding and being able to read the Hebrew scriptures in their original language, and as well as understanding them in a way that escapes even most Hebrew scholars. And his whole crew are very able and apt in that way. And so really, I consider them to be a very intelligent, very wise group of individuals and very well researched on a lot of different topics. The one that will be focused on this evening, but we will cover other aspects of his other work as well, is his book, The Destruction of the Sabbath, which has as part of it how the God with his calendar being based on a lunar month, how using that calendar you can keep track of the Sabbaths, and how with our Gregorian calendar and alien calendar that runs in days, running weeks back to back without consideration of the conjunction or the new moon, how it makes keeping track of the Sabbath absolutely impossible. And so with that, Christopher, are you there, brother?
Wow, that's one intro I've never ever got before. Wow. I'm going to get you to write that all down and frame it, and I'll put it somewhere.
Well, this show will be archived, so you'll be able to have access to it.
There you go. There you go. Years from now, I can look back and say, boy, I was a lot smarter than I thought I was. Well, it's been here, so.
Go ahead. If you would give out your website and talk about the Chronicle Project and the work that you do.
Okay, if anybody out there is listening and wants to go to the website, all you have to do is go to thechronicleproject.org, and you can pick all of the material that we're going to discuss is on there for free. And as Zen was mentioning, the book, The Destruction of Sabbath, you can find that. It was a bestseller on Amazon, and we're going to let you have it for free. Just go to the website, and it's going to be there on the website. You can just click on it, and it'll download a copy for you to your computer, and then you can read it, and no charge.
Well, that's another thing that I really respect as far as you and your group, the work that you do, is that you try in every regard to make it freely available to the public. You just want them to, be able to follow along with the work that you are doing, which is amazing in itself. But to make that freely available shows how much you and your group are true disciples of Yeshua, and being so giving in that regard.
I think it's important to me. I mean, to charge for it. We did have it on Amazon, and I had somebody say, why did you put it on Amazon and actually charge for it in this case? The answer was we wanted to get it out there for a wider berth to read, and Amazon wouldn't let us put it on for free because the download cost was so high because the thing was so thick at the time. And so what we did instead is I cropped some of the stuff off the back because you can get it free on our website, and I just put the contents of the book and then put it on our website free. Once it hit the bestseller list, I had it so that people could have it for free. So that's why we actually stuck it out there. And then the money that came in actually just went for paying to keep the website up. So I want to thank everybody who actually purchased a copy. I actually got letters from a lot of them, and it was very nice, actually. I expected some negative response because when I when I meet people in person, a lot of times it's a very touchy subject. But the letters I got were, I think, probably 100% positive. It was really nice.
Well, excellent. Do you have a actual paperback or a hardback edition of it?
Well, that's a funny story. We have been trying for a year to get a hardback edition. I wanted a hard copy for the people who hate internet, such as myself. And we've been through 6 editors and some other stuff. And then every time we try to do something, something crashes, it's the weirdest thing that I've ever seen. I'm taking it as I don't have all the information in it yet that we should have in it. So I was just actually thinking about that before I came on the show today. I'm thinking it's time I'm going to go back through, because as I was preparing for the interview here, I was thinking, there's a couple of items that we have discovered since that point in the translations and the restorations we've been doing, and I'd like to add those in. And I think once we get that, yes, there'll be a hard copy out there available for everybody.
Excellent, excellent. Because I'm the kind of person that likes to go out and be with the elements and
Mhm.
and read in that way and not have to always read from my computer because I do so much of that already.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and I
I
also find that with my focus, that in doing it that way, being outside and in the
mhm.
quiet, that I can digest the contents with a
Good.
greater acuity.
I never thought of it that way. Me, I just think of it as my eyes hurt after a while looking at this screen.
Right? Yes,
So
that too.
yeah, no, I would much rather love the tactility of a real book. So I'm really hoping, and I'll let you know as soon as we have one. So
Yeah, most definitely. I appreciate that.
sure.
Before we go into that aspect of your work in this particular book, can you talk about the Chronicle Project and explain it in a way that the layperson
Sure.
can relate
Well,
to?
yeah, and just so that people understand, we ourselves are not professional people in any way in this area. In fact, we're just like average people. What happened is we just started asking questions, and when we started looking for answers, the answers that popped up ended up being the Chronicle Project, and we just continued on it from there. Before I go ahead into it, like to mention there's going to be 3 kinds of people who are listening to this program right now. There's going to be those who believe that the Bible, as it is the absolute Word of God and has no mistakes. There's going to be those out there who believe it has mistakes and it's a useless piece of information, a fairy tale at best. And then there's going to be those out there who are looking for the truth in all of this mess because they've seen both sides. And I'm just saying to everybody out there, as you're listening, give the whole program your time before you hit the point and say, oh, this is ridiculous, I'm going to shut this off, because I need everybody to be that third kind tonight, looking for the truth. And at the end of the program, you can disagree, I don't care, but get all the information first with what Zen and I are going to talk about. And then after that, you can go back to whatever you choose, that is yours. But always obtain the information first. So as Zen asked, I'll tell you a little about what happened. We are Jewish, but we also believe that Jesus was who he said he was, and so we follow him. And I would like to point out that we were having trouble with stuff in the Bible because, as I mentioned before, we were having trouble with trying to understand how it could be the Word of God and still have mistakes. And for those of you out there who don't believe it has mistakes, I'm going to give you an example, and this is the one that came out to me the most. If you go into Genesis, Go into chapter 1. It says, "And God made the beasts of the earth after its kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the ground after its kind, and God saw it was good." Verse 26, "And God said, Let us make man in our image." So we have him making the beasts of the earth and all of that, and then man. But if you go into chapter 2, by the way, that would be the sixth day in the Bible. If you go into chapter 2, it says, "No shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up. So the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the ground." Verse 6, "There went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." Verse 7, "Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils, and he became a living soul." Then to verse 19, "Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, the fowl of the air." And you see where the problem comes in. We have the first one having man made before, and in chapter 2, it's the opposite way around. And it's material like that that makes people who are reading and who see stuff like this say, wait a second, how can I believe this to be the Word of God when there's a mistake that obvious in the first 2 chapters? And that then is where people have problems. So you have 2 choices here. You can say, hey, this thing has mistakes, it's obviously phony, and toss it. Or you can ignore the mistakes and say, no, brother, I'm going to take this by faith and ignore it, and I'll understand it later. No, you can't do that either. That's like standing on the highway when you hear a car approaching and going, you know what, I'm just going to take it by faith. I'm not in the wrong position. No, you turn around and look. And so with this kind of problem, and this is not the only place, with these kind of problems throughout the texts, we said, okay, we have to sit down and look at this and say to ourselves, if this really is from a deity, from an outside source, it's not man-made, then maybe the problem is not the word itself, but the translation that comes from the word. So we went back to the Hebrew and we began looking at the Hebrew and came to realizations that there was a lot of problems with it. And I'll give you an idea. You can butt in, by the way, at any time, Zen, because I can just babble on here.
Yeah, no. I want you to set the foundation for your work, so continue on.
I'm going to take the first line of Genesis in the Hebrew. Now, people can't see it, so I can't point to it. But if you have a potential to see the Hebrew, and you can go to sites like Macon Mamre and pop up the Hebrew and take a look at it. But in the very first sentence of the Bible, which they have as, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." If you read that sentence in Hebrew, or even if you don't know Hebrew, but you take those words and you look them up in the dictionary, you'll notice that the fourth word in, which is pronounced ath, and it's the aleph tav, the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, it is left untranslated. It doesn't exist. And then if you go to the 6th word, which is and, then the word ath appears again, and it is left untranslated. If you go to something like the Strong's and look it up, they will tell you that this is a word that is unexpressed in English, which is a weird concept, but that's what they will tell you. And yet this word appears over 12,000 times in the Old Testament. When they need it to, the word will appear as with and lots of other words. But when it's not convenient to the translation, which upholds the religious beliefs that it is right now, they don't translate this word. So we began to say, well, okay, we have a problem here because the translations are not done correctly. So what's the problem here? And we said, maybe the rules on how this language is looked at are the problem. So we ignored all of the rules for the language and sat down and said, let's look at the language as a whole and start to see if there are patterns to this language that would show a more logical construct than the way the present rules are. And if you have never tried to study ancient Hebrew, you need a couple of really thick books, and then good luck, because there are so many rules to this language that it literally makes English look easy. And if you ask anybody who's ever tried studying English who is non-English, they will tell you that this is probably the hardest language. And Hebrew, by far, it is so complex, the way that it is set up right now, that experts will fight over one single word as to whether or not it's this or that, and even they can't come to conclusions on what it should be. And yet at the same time, we're expected to believe that a 5-year-old Hebrew boy would be fluent in the language. So what we did is we started looking for patterns that would show a more logical construct that a higher power would use rather than the rules that they had done. And what happened is, and Kim, my wife, was the first to do this, as she was reading through the Hebrew dictionary, she came upon a word that in English means to tear. And then she noticed that if they added a different letter onto the word was still to tear, but it changed the direction of how you tore it. So you could tear it down, tear it off, tear it into pieces. And so each time the letter changed on the 2-letter word, the direction or how it was done was changed. And she said, hey, do you think that this would be the same if we looked at another? So we looked at another, trying to find a multiple word like that, and sure enough, every single time that same letter appeared on the end of a word, it would cause the word to react in the same way. Now, to make a long story short, even if you want to read a long discourse on this, go to the website and look up the research notes, because it'll explain this in depth. To make a long story short, after 3 years, we were able to decipher what the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, what each letter wasn't a letter at all, but it was actually a glyph, like a hieroglyph, with a complete concept behind each of the letters. So when you saw a Hebrew word, it wasn't a word, it was actually a description. And here's where it became interesting, because each word had its own description in it. And so if you could read the description, you would know whether or not somebody had mistranslated the word. So with that, we went back and started going at the Hebrew to see, using this concept, what would happen. And now we have several rules that we follow by. Rule 1, once we get the description and we have to switch it over to an English word, that English word must fit every single time that word appears in the whole of what the Christians would call the Old Testament. So you can't just have a description and have something close. It has to fit every single time that appears. And as I said, some of the words can appear 12,000 plus times. So there is context to be taken with the translation. And so we began applying this in. And as we got in a couple of years, we found an even greater discovery on this. And that was that you could take any word in Hebrew and read the description using the proper way that you should divide a word. But if you divided it improperly and joined several glyphs together and separated things and then read it, the description, although it would be a different description, would point to exactly the same concept. And to give you an idea, if you took the name Abram, which everybody knows, so it would be a simple one to start with. It's made out of 4 Hebrew letters with the sounds A, B, R, and M. And if you divide it correctly using the SDH, it would mean to populate those, which is what Abram was going to do. If you spread it incorrectly, then you would have, for example, to have seed to mass. Well, it's the same concept. He's going to have lots of offspring. If you split it slightly differently, it would be to begin to produce those, the same concept. And what was even more amazing is if you flipped it around and read it backwards. In this case, it would be that to multiply to begin. So no matter how these words in Hebrew are dissected, you cannot mistranslate the word, because you can check for the word's description on multiple levels at all different angles, and you'll know whether or not you have the right word. With that, we went back to Genesis, and we ran Genesis so far 15 chapters through what we call self-defining Hebrew, or SDH, and the results, as you know, Zen, were extraordinary.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, which makes the work just incredible, because when you go back to the translations that Chris and his group have been able to provide, it gives you a whole different kind of insight into the foundation of the scriptures. And and then, as far as detail and different concepts, it where something may have been ambiguous, it can shed light, in translating it this way, it can shed light on the true meaning. And so can you share a few examples of, where you have brought out and been given greater insight into some passages which people have, don't necessarily understand?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go back to the mistake I described in the chapter 1 and chapter 2 on the day that man was made. If you go to the chapters and look, we have Adam being made on the sixth day in chapter 1. In chapter 2, it appears, in chapter 1, man is made on the sixth day. In chapter 2, it appears to be on the third day. But if you go and you read it in the Hebrew, the person being made on the sixth day, they've left the word oth out again. And that is the important word. 12,900 plus times this word is there and left out when it's convenient. But the word, if we take the two letters, the first letter, the aleph, means to begin. And the last letter, the thava or the tav, means to continue along with. So if you put the two together, it's to begin, to continue along with. And so it forms the English word to join. If you put the word oth back in on the sixth day, then it says that they made the to join the man, not they made the man. And the to join the man is Eve.
Right.
So suddenly we understand that there's not a mistake, but that we see Eve being made on the sixth day. And then we go to chapter 2, and it is Adam being made on the third day. Suddenly the mistake is gone, because the restoration properly done takes away that problem that wasn't there.
Very interesting.
Okay, super important. So then we move on. Now you asked what kind of things that the SDH could bring out, and the stuff is endless. And this is why every time we do a new section, we're like, wow, that's incredible. But I think I'll go back to the start. I think one of the things that I thought was the most amazing was that we have day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and that's how they're translated. But what they didn't know in the Hebrew, because they didn't see these enough, there's several ways that numbered words are spelled, and they just assumed that there was a verb or something happening. So they made up an excuse for it. What they didn't realize is that if a word is spelled differently than it normally is, the reason is because they've added more information. So if you have two words that are similar, but one has slightly different spelling, but they're supposed to mean the same thing, it's because one is a Hebrew word play. They've got a word that sounds like, let's say, the Hebrew word for 3, but there's more information in it. And so what's absolutely fascinating about that is that you would have to know what you were going to be doing before you even created the language in order to put these word plays in. Now, I'll give an example. And I should explain why it's important in this case, because the names for the days, like 1, 2, 3, 4, are not only the names of the days, but because they're spelled slightly differently in some of the cases, they tell you what occurs on that day.
Wow.
Why that was important is because if you read in the Bible right now, they have the first day as when God is creating light and all of that stuff. And that's not actually the correct start. If you know Hebrew at all, days begin with the evening. And so
Yes.
if you take that concept in, you cannot have the timekeeping of a day until you have your light and your darkness into play. And so it became obvious that as soon as the light and the dark was together, it said, and so existed sunset and then sunrise of the first day. So, in other words, the first day begins when it says, and so existed sunset. That's the start of the day. So, the days in the Bible are out of sync by a day.
Huh.
Okay? And I'll give you an example of this can be a little difficult because I'm using the SDH in front of me here, but day one is actually called the day to unify. So the word one is actually to unify. And on that day in the restoration we did, it says, and so the originators, and by the way, the term Elohim showed itself not to be God, which they had translated as God, but is a plural, and it means the ones who originate things. So it is more likely talking about the angels, or who we would term as the angels. Okay? So the originators declared, so shall exist the sky to cut amid the water, and let the atmosphere exist independent between that water for that water. So what happened on that day is that they took the atmosphere and they drove it into the oceans, and they took the water from the oceans and they sprayed it into the sky. So they put moisture into the air and they oxygenated the oceans. Now that's fascinating because it's called the day to unify. And on that day they unified these two items. And very interesting is the fact that it said that let the atmosphere exist independent between that water for that water. Only within the last century did we even understand that oxygen, when it was in water, it doesn't become part of the water. It exists independent in that water. And yet right here in this old script, it's saying that very scientific piece straight up front.
Right.
Shepherds wouldn't have known that.
Right.
Okay? Right. The next day is called the day to pair. Day two is the day to pair. And that's when the land was brought up out of the waters.
Hey, hold on,
And
Chris. We're at first break.
oh,
We'll
go
pick it
for it.
up with day two as soon as we come back. Be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. Um, I have as guest with me Christopher Tyreman of the Chronicle Project, also the author of the Destruction of the Sabbath, which we will be going into probably sometime near the end of this segment. And just so you know, we will also I will Pale Rider, and I just finished reading the article, so after I'll give him the link and let him read it over the long break between 9 and right at 9, and then he can comment on it, and I will comment on it then as well. But I wanted to let you know that we will be bringing them back on because this information is quite in depth, and it takes a long time to make it accessible to those that have never heard it or have studied it in such way. And I don't want to just rush through it because I think his work with the Chronicle Project is absolutely fascinating as well as important, and the work with the destruction of the Sabbath equally so. So, um, Christopher, you were talking about the second day, and so we'll spend, you still got 20 or 30 minutes to cover this particular aspect of your work. And then with the second hour, we will pick up with the destruction of the Sabbath. And wherever we stop, we'll pick up on the next show we do on as far as the ongoing series.
Sure. What I'm trying to do here, in case people are listening, is I'm trying to work you slowly into why the days are important. As the days were out of sync, there's a lot of information that got lost, and because the Hebrew wasn't translated properly, a lot of Hebrew got lost. I should mention, Zen, before I go any further, it has started to really rain here, and there's a big storm front coming through. We're up here in Saskatchewan, Canada, in case anybody wonders where we are. And so if you lose me, it's probably from a power out. They usually last only a few seconds here. So if you lose me, I'm not gone. Just try back in a few seconds and I'll be here.
Okay, excellent. Well, continue on. And just so you know, Chris, I'm going to link the two articles that they wanted you to comment on after this first hour. You'll have time. The break between the next segment and the one following is about 5 minutes. So I'll link these in your chat, Skype chat. So,
Sure.
but please continue on.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, we were at day 2, and what we were looking at, in case you've just joined us now, is how using what we discovered known as the self-defining Hebrew system, which was built in by its creator so that he could make sure that you could never mistranslate the Hebrew language if you knew how this system worked. And we took this system, we reapplied it to Genesis and some of the other books, and restored the Hebrew using the system that was actually there. As I was mentioning earlier to Zen, one of the things that was most interesting is that when the days were properly synced up, that each of the Hebrew words that had extra letters in it actually told you what was being done on that day. So we had finished with day 1, which was to unify, when the atmosphere of the earth and the waters were mixed with each other so that the air could get clouds and that the oceans could get air so they could support life. Day 2 is called the day to pair. And on that day, the lands were pushed up out of the oceans and the water was unloaded off of the lands. And so those two were paired. And then all of the sprouts, the seeds, the fruit trees, and everything else, that was paired onto the earth to grow. So that happened on what is in the Bible called day 2. The Hebrew is actually the day to pair, but it also sounds like, or also is the word for pairing or for the day 2. Now, we move on to day 3, and day 3 is of interest because as we're moving into the concept of the Sabbath, this actually is very important. If you look at the word 3, it is not written the same way as it is other places, and it has extras to it, and so the word is actually divided up into 2 things, and it becomes these words: to go to, so to display. So what it's saying is on the 3rd day, something was sent to a place, it went to a place so it could be displayed. Now, in the Bible, it simply says it was day 3, and so this information is lost without the SDH. So on day 3, when we restored the Hebrew in, some very important things came to light, without which you cannot probably understand the correct way that Sabbath was set up, because we have a Sabbath and how it is done all within these first 7 days is shown, but if you read it in the Bible, it doesn't. Now, you're going to sit there and say, hey, wait a second, how do we believe you? And the answer is, go to the website, read all of the research material, and try it for yourself. If you change one of the definitions for one of the letters in the Hebrew language and then try it, the whole system falls apart. It has to be done exactly the way it's set up or it doesn't work. And that's how you know that it works. It's not just something random. So when we restored on day 3, I start with verse 13. And so existed sunset, and so existed sunrise of the day to go to, so to display, day 3. And so the originators declared, let there exist that which continues to vary, which is the moon, amid the sky of the celestials, in space, independent between the day and the night. And here's what it says it's for. And it shall exist for tides, and for congregations, and for measures, and for years. These are all of the things that the moon is placed by the originators and creator into the sky for. Now, this doesn't say that the moon was created on that day. Understand this. What it's saying is that it was positioned there on this day. And there's a big difference between the two.
Right.
So we don't want to extrapolate that. So then it says, and to be existing for continued illumination amid the sky of the celestials, for spreading out discernment upon the earth, and it came to be in this way. And so to finish, the originators joined. They paired the moon, that which varies to continue, the one to regard for multiple things, to join the sun, that which illuminates, the one to regard for continued administration of the day. Now, do you notice that, Zen? The sun has one function and one function only, to administer the day.
Right.
The moon, on the other hand, exists for tides, congregations, measures, and years. So on this third day, it says that the sun and the moon were paired. Now, most people, if you just rush past that, you'll miss the whole point of it. And that is this. The word paired, again, there's that word oth. And in the Bible, that's left untranslated. So you don't get paired, okay, to join. So they joined the sun and the moon. Now, obviously, the sun and the moon are not joined. But what they mean is they positioned the moon on that day between the earth and the sun in what's known as the dark of the moon, so that the moon, if you were standing on earth, you wouldn't be able to see it because it would basically be where the sun is. And they not only positioned it in that place, but they positioned it at the necessary distance from us that both the sun and the moon appear to be exactly the same size. And that's why we get a solar eclipses, because the moon can pass in front of it. So if you think about a solar eclipse, the day that's being described here on day 3, that's how they positioned the moon. Now, it doesn't mean that a solar eclipse occurred, but it was in that position on the day. Now, because there's nothing random in the writing, one must take note of that. So if we skip past that then and go to day 6, day 6 is really important because the word in this case for 6 is shan, shan, yod. And to a normal person who is reading Hebrew, they think that was the word 6. But you can also have shan, shan as the word 6. So as I said before, if there's an extra letter, it's telling you something. Now, the Hebrew word in this case, if you don't know the Hebrew alphabet, you might want to, or Aleph bit, if you can call it that, the Aleph bit, you can look it up online, or as I said, go to our website and have it there. The shan looks like a W. So it'd be like WW and then this little squiggly thing. And it is the number 6 if you have just shan, shan. The reason it's the number 6 is because the word shan means to project. So if you want to see what it is, you put both hands out in front of you, and here's where we can do a little Star Trek for you. When the Kohen are blessing the people turn around and they extend both hands and they spread them like Spock does, which is where Leonard Nimoy got that from. So live long and prosper. And as a kid, he would turn around because everybody wants to see what the Kohen, the high priests, are doing, the priests at the service. And they would split their hands in the live long and prosper symbol, and then they would bless the people. That was considered the hands of invocation. You're invoking a blessing upon the people. And so when you see shan, shan, if you put both hands out, project them both, you will see 3 separations on each hand, which count up to 6. Does that make sense then? Okay. Now, in this case, we have a yod, and in SDH, yod means to manifest, and that means to make something appear. So the name for day 6, because the extra yod is there, and because, yes, it means 6, but it also means to invoke, and the Hebrew hearer understands this, but the English person wouldn't, so we have to bracket stuff for them. That would be called the day that the invocation was to appear. Does that make sense? Day 6? Okay. So what they were saying is on day 6, something was going to manifest, something was going to appear that would become the authority. And I could probably, invocation is the action of invoking something or someone for assistance or as an authority. So what they were saying on day 6 was, on day 6, something was going to appear that was going to be an authority, something that would give assistance. So the question is, what was going to appear on day 6? So if you want to go into a little science, it's very simple. When the moon was paired on day 3, it was put in the dark of the moon position. It will take 72 hours from that point until it would appear at the end in the evening of day 6. And so on day 6, you're going to get a crescent moon with roughly 7% of the surface illuminated, which is interesting because you get 7% on the 7th day. So the evening of the 6th day, start of the 7th, that crescent moon appeared on in the creation story on that day, and it heralded the beginning of the first Sabbath.
Right.
Okay, now the important part here is this. These first 7 days that are written down, they are the archetype for us to understand how everything from that point on was to be held. So what we have here is the crescent moon appearing 7% lit. We know this because 72 hours after the moon's at the perfect dark of the moon position paired with the sun, it would appear to the earth the first time. And also I note this is the crescent that would be visible through the whole earth. Okay, you can get crescents that appear sometimes that are slightly smaller, like 3 or 4%, but you can't see them all over the earth. Only certain people get to see that. And so this was a crescent moon, 7% lit, which would be visible to everybody on the earth, meaning that everybody on the earth would be able to see Sabbath at exactly the same time. That's very important.
Can you, because I think that this would be an appropriate place to go into the discussion of your book too. Can you explain how the conjunction, the new moon, is not included in the days that are, that lead up to these Sabbaths? If I'm correct with the research that I've done on this, new moon or conjunction is begins the first day of the month, but it is not included in the count of those days which are that lead up to the first Sabbath.
Help people understand really quickly where we're going with this.
Okay.
If we have something here that's very important, that we have this crescent moon. Now the crescent moons, the appearance of this 7% lit crescent moon is the start of the month, which is very interesting because we then know from this, it is revealed that this day would have been the very first day of the month, which means it would have probably been the very first day of the first year. Because of that, we can then make tabulations forward knowing that this was the very first day, calendar day, of the new year. And that would make that crescent moon that appeared in Genesis on that day the first of the month of Nisan, which is the first month of the Hebrew calendar. Okay. The other reason we know that it was Nisan is because all of the fruit and the seeds and everything in the garden was ready to eat on that day. And everything ripens is ready for ripening on the first of Nisan. And you also know this because when Creator had the Jews leave Egypt, they left on Passover, the 14th of Nisan. And he had them do so because the fresh harvest was just in. Okay? So they had all that harvest. And they had all the food they needed for the journey. And the second thing is, because the crescent moon starts the month, by the 14th of Nisan, that night would have been a full moon. So they had all the light they needed to make that journey at night. Okay? Now that's very important because some people say that the full moon starts the month for the Hebrew Sabbath. But if it did that, then Creator would have had people trying to get out of Egypt in absolute dark.
Right.
And that would have been the worst possible scenario because you would have needed torches, you would have been wasting oil and all stuff like that. Okay, back to answer your question. So, the Hebrew month starts with the 7% lit crescent moon. Now, after that, when are the Sabbaths from that point held? So I'll go through some very important stuff here. There is a mistake among what are known as the Sabbatarians that Sabbath has been an unbroken cycle of 7 days from the start of the earth.
Right.
And this is not correct, because Sabbaths are not every 7 days, because there are special Sabbaths. For example, Passover on the 14th is now a Sabbath, but that is not a normal Sabbath, that is a special Sabbath. Sabbath simply means a rest day. Okay? If you take the Old Testament, even the way that it is right now, and look up the word Sabbath and the directions, nowhere does it say that Sabbath is every 7 days. And you see, this is one of the mistakes that people get into the mindset. Sabbath has to be every 7 days. No, it doesn't say that. It says 6 days of work and then Sabbath. So what it says is you can never go longer than 6 days of work without a Sabbath. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the month begins with the new moon Sabbath. And by the way, that's very important, because a lot of people will say new moon isn't a Sabbath. Well, the very first one was. And that's the archetype. So every new moon, yes, it's a new moon, but it is also a Sabbath day. So we had the first Sabbath, then you would have 6 days of work, then a Sabbath. So scriptural Hebrew Sabbaths then must fall on these days every Hebrew month. The first, then 6 days of work, then the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of every Hebrew month. Those are constant. Okay? Then you await the next 7% crescent moon. Sometimes there will be 30 days in the month. Sometimes there'll only be 29 days in the month, because the moon circles around the earth every 29.53 days.
Right.
Now, some people find that very confusing, because they try to match that to Gregorian calendar. And if you do, you'll go insane, because they do not blend. And I had the hardest time with this when we first discovered this. And I should mention, by the way, that I co-authored the book with Brad Vornholt. And his family has been working on this for, probably 10 to 15 years. And they had discovered it because they had been with the Seventh Day Adventist Church, and they had come across some files that had been put away and marked that they were not to be brought forward. And they'd read the files, and the Seventh Day Adventist Church had done a full study on this and had discovered exactly what we were talking about now, and realized that Sabbath was being held incorrectly, because
Right.
presently Jews hold it Friday night to Saturday night, which is what I was holding, as are the Seventh Day Adventists. They realized this was incorrect, and they buried the material, because they said, if we let this out, we'll lose all our members. So it came down to money and power. They found this study and said to the people in charge, you have to release this material. They said, if you release this material, we will excommunicate you. And they released the material, and they were excommunicated. It was quite a large thing. The heads of the church came and had them excommunicated. They wrote a lot of material on it, continued to write material on it, and then Brad had contacted me, because we had the ability to actually restore verses that appeared to conflict with Sabbath being held based on the scriptural lunar cycle. And so we did a couple of verses for him, and I was shocked at how each of the verses had been, what I personally feel was purposely mistranslated
Yes.
to make it look like Creator broke his own Sabbath. Because you would have a word that was, and one in particular I was thinking was pull up the tent pegs, and every single other time it had the opposite meaning. Only here once did that Hebrew word get translated that. It became evident that whoever was doing these translations had a specific agenda to keep this material from anybody reading it. So I've digressed a bit, so I'll jump back.
Okay, before you move on, can I ask you something?
Sure. Go
Would
for
this
it.
also have anything to do with how, Israel, the people of Israel, Joshua, they were told to march for, 7 days around the city of Ai? We'll pick it up when we come back. Hold on, Chris.
Sure.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I have as guests with me Christopher Tyreman of the Chronicle Project and co-author of the Destruction of the Sabbath. I do want to quickly remind everybody that Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported, commercial-free, and corporate-free radio network on the planet and on the internet, and that we have a wide, eclectic variety of different hosts that cover all different topics on both Studio A and Studio B, and that we come to you 24/7 every day of the week, and that you can find the most interesting articles and topics being discussed on both of the different studios by the wide array of different hosts that we have. And in order for us to continue bringing truth to you in the way that we do need your financial help. So if you can, please go to freedomslips.com and donate to us monetarily. There are also many other things that you can do. As far as your donations, you can support the network by buying the bullet drive with all the emergency information, the archives, data disk of the different archives of your favorite hosts, all of the shows of the year, buy access to the archives, which gives you the ability to download all the shows from all the different hosts, and even the non-GMO seed pack, which would give you the ability in times of trouble to generate your own food. Many different ways, coffee mugs, t-shirts, things of that nature. We appreciate your fellowship and your help and consider you to be very wise in your own right as far as seekers of truth. Um, I did read the articles, Pale Rider, and there's a couple things I wanted to highlight from what I read. As far as there was a particular, I believe his name was Rabbi Kaduri, who was a very well respected and very old individual. He was looked to as an authority on the scriptures for a very long time. He left a note to not unfold or read the note until after his death, and it said something about Yeshua being the Messiah and that he would be coming soon, and that he said that to watch for the death of Ariel Sharon, who was at that time in a coma, and he said that the return of the Messiah would be linked to somewhere after the death of Ariel Sharon, which we know that happened not too long ago. And another thing, there's as far as the giants, which if you have not read those articles, Pale Rider, post them again in the chat room. They're very interesting. One of them speaks about the return of the giants or the Nephilim with the end of days, and that they might possibly herald the return of the Messiah as well. And there's a passage from the Cave of Treasures that speaks about how these giants, or 33 tribes of giants, that they were locked into the interior of the earth at the polar north opening, and that like Joel chapter 2, that they might possibly have significance with the locust army, or what Joel chapter 2 speaks about as a people great and that has not been, the likes of since the very beginning, and how they destroyed the wilderness, that it was Eden before them, and after them it was, totally destroyed, and how they could climb on the walls, and that they would not even die if they fell upon their own sword. And so they were possibly some kind of supernatural being. Revelation 9 also speaks of the locust army, and that these particular beings are also supernatural. And so there absolutely could be something to it. Now, as to the date that was posted in the first article, as to whether that this would all be happening on September, no, or near September 12th of this year, I have no clue. I say to be perpetually ready at all times. We never know when, um, when things are going to unfold. But according to even like Saint Malachi's, his prophecy of the last pope, that this pope in office now, that is equated to Petrus Romanus, and that he would be the last pope, the false prophet that heralds the coming of the Antichrist. And so, who knows? These are definitely strange times. Chris, let me get you to comment on those two articles, and then we'll move into continuing with the teachings on the Sabbath and your book, The Destruction of the Sabbath.
Okay. I've sent you another link, by the way, that sort of falls into this, something that we posted on our news. I've done it a couple of times, actually. And it's about an ancient structure that's been discovered under the Sea of Galilee.
Interesting.
And well worth reading. The reason is, if you go with the book of Enoch, it talks about the desert of Dudael, that they were to dig a holding area and put the what they call angels into that area, and some of the other stuff was in there too, and then it was to be buried over. If you go into the book of Revelation, it talks about the beast rising out of the sea. Okay.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Interesting point of this is this burial cairn is exactly the description: uncut rocks stacked on top of this holding area. And this cairn is this monster area of uncut rocks stacked, and they don't know what's underneath it. And they're looking to go down and open it.
Oh, wow.
Now, at the time that this was created, this area was not under the sea. And it wasn't until the land bridge broke that the water came into this area and is now the Sea of Galilee. So we have Enoch saying that they were buried in the desert of Dudael, and we have Revelation saying the beast arises from the sea.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Very interesting. And of course, they want to open it, which would be a very bad idea if that's
Right.
who it is.
Right.
Okay. Coming of the Messiah at the end of the year. I'm voting no. Well, maybe I should sit back on this. If you believe the book of Revelation, the Revelation of John, to be true, then you have to vote no. And if you don't believe the Revelation of John to be true, then it's possible. But if I take that in context, that the Revelation of John is accurate, and there's some stuff in it that I find it impossible for a person who was living on the earth at that time to know, I would have to vote that the book was real and originally written in Hebrew. And there are things that have to occur that have not occurred before he would come again. If we jump back to Jesus' own words, there was a list of stuff that he described, and this stuff has not been fulfilled, so I have to vote no. But that having been said, to tie back to the potential for one of these guys getting out from under the Sea of Galilee, if they are there, the book of Revelation talks about the Antichrist. Now, what people don't understand is in Greek, anti doesn't mean against. It means forgery or a copy of something that looks exactly like something but isn't. And if you read in Revelation, you have this description of this being with the glowing eyes, the white hair, the voice, all of that at the start, which people attribute to be Jesus. And if these angels that were here at the time of Noah that propagated with human females and produced the giants as offspring, are the ones in there, they have the ability to look just like that. So someone could come out of that pit and claim to be the Messiah. And considering what they're capable of doing, and considering that they would have a host of angels with them, they could quite easily pass themselves off as the returning Messiah. And almost everybody would believe it.
Right.
Which is a scary thought.
Interesting too.
Yeah, the Nephilim returning. Eek, that's a horrifying thought.
Right.
Jesus did say, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And maybe we should talk about that sometime on a show, because when we restored that section, chapter 9, 8, and 9, there was some real fascinating stuff. And just the other day, I was going through the word Nephilim again because it kept bothering me. And I decided to do a multi-level check on it instead of just going with the word to fall. It's the plural of the word to fall, but it also, if you separate it slightly differently and do the multi-level check, forward, backward, it doesn't always translate as to fall. And it could also mean the ones who were positioned here.
Hmm.
So it means that the name of the Nephilim, it's actually a class of beings who were placed here to, like specifically placed here to oversee what was going on.
Yeah,
Which,
that's
believe it or
interesting.
not, we can tie back in to the whole Sabbath thing that we're going to talk about right now.
Right.
So how I'll tie that back in is this. What most people don't know, we have the snake in the garden with Eve. The snake was not a snake. When restored, this person called the snake is actually, it's a position, the Nakash. And yes, that can be translated as snake because Hebrew is a descriptive. And so sometimes the descriptive can cover several things. In this case, it's known as, or this being was the Nakash. It doesn't mean snake, but it means the, to precede, to project. In other words, the one who is in charge of everything which precedes being projected. And that might sound confusing until you look at the first chapters of Genesis and you realize that everything that's being done and created is then projected onto the earth. So this person that was written as a snake and made look like a fairy tale would have been the second in command of the terraforming of our planet. And in the restored work, he saw the chance to legally steal this planet away from Creator by using a legal loophole. And Creator, unlike how the Bible makes it look, is absolutely bound by his own law. He will not break his own law. And so what he had done is Creator turned over and gave authority, full control of the earth to the Adam, the humans. And they were to be under Creator, and so Creator would in essence be in charge of the earth, but man would be under Creator and we would be in charge of the earth. The Nakash saw an opening here, and what he did is he got the Adam, which is the overname for all of humanity, both Adam and Eve, to rebel against the instructions that they were given, to mutiny against those instructions, and instead follow his instructions. And when you get our restored material, it shows the Creator comes and says, you mutinied against me and you joined him. You can't undo that. So he is now in charge of the planet.
Right.
This is where Sabbath becomes important, and people don't understand why. And there's a great amount of disinformation out there on purpose designed to make sure that the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians will not keep scriptural Sabbath. And I will explain why. When the Nakash got control of the earth, the only way that Creator could then have access legally, and he's bound by his law, so legally he needed a legal loophole, and that was to set up a people that were under him. In order to do that, in order to set up this legal contract, you have to have something which shows that you are part of that contract. And so he set up Sabbath as that contract, as one portion of that contract. I give you my Sabbath to show that you are my people and that I am your Creator. Okay? Once somebody is following Sabbath, that means that is the proof that you are in contract with Creator. Because you are an Adam, and you are, whether you're male or female, you're still an Adam, you have legal authority over the earth. Now, right now, most humans those in religion and not in religion are under the control or the authority of the Nakash, and they don't know it.
Right.
But somebody who keeps Sabbath keeps contract with Creator, and they are under Him. And why this is important becomes very, very scary. If we go to Jesus, and Jesus is teaching His disciples, they said, teach us what to pray. And he goes through this list of what to ask for, but he finishes off, let your will be done on the earth as it is, and I'm going to say off-world, because the word heavens there, it simply means any place not here on the earth. Okay? Now, if Creator was in charge of the earth, why would humans have to give him the legal right to interfere? That's what that statement is, that they are to pray every day. Is that a little hard to grasp?
I apologize. Say that one more time.
It's okay. He tells his disciples the last thing that they are to start praying in the morning is to say to Creator, let your will be done on the earth as it is, in essence, not on the earth. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Had to give him, because the Adam, humans, have the authority over the earth, but we're under the Nakash, we have to give him authority to legally interfere on the earth. He does not own this planet.
Right, right.
Nor does he have legal right to be here without a human giving him that legal right. But a human doesn't have the legal right to do that unless they are under him. And the proof of being under him, according to the scripture, is the keeping of scriptural, you betcha.
Right, right. No, I apologize because one of my kittens here was being attacked by one of my older cats, so it just threw me off for a second.
I had that same problem over here.
You might have heard him in the background, but anyways, so I apologize. But so can you another thing? Whenever you get a chance, can you go into how it is that people now can follow Sabbath? How it is that they can get back into determining when that is, and mark it as holy and honor the Creator in that way by following it.
Right. Now, again, I'll mention to people, you may be sitting out there thinking, whatever, this is just a religious day. This is not just a religious day. This is the base of the covenant of proof that you are under Creator. And all religion aside, if this being, the Nakash, legally stole this planet and is keeping us from having access to Creator and all off-world stuff, we're basically being held hostage underneath the powers that be. And it sounds totally science fiction-ish. But if these scriptures, if these texts are true, this is exactly what's happening. And the only way to give him legal access is we have to keep Sabbath, and then we have to say to him, you have legal right to have your will done on this planet just like it's done everywhere off
right
planet. And so in order to keep Sabbath really simple and really hard, really simple because all you have to do is you go and you get a moon app off of the internet. And what moon apps are is they show you how much of the moon is lit on which day. And so go on, get one of these moon apps and spin through it until you see it says that 7% of the surface of the moon is lit or slightly greater. That evening, when that will occur, that will be the first of the month on the Hebrew calendar, and that is a Sabbath. That begins a Sabbath, and the Sabbath extends from the evening of one night to the evening of the next night, or in other words, darkness to darkness if you're in Israel. If you're not, around 6:30 to 6:30, because if you kept it up here like that in Canada, we never have darkness. It gets really weird here in the summertime. You're looking at darkness maybe at 11 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock it's light again. So it would be crazy. But the intent is to keep a 24-hour period. Now, that having been said, a lot of people out there will sit there and go, wait a second, I'm a Christian. We don't keep Jewish Sabbath. It's unnecessary for us to keep Jewish Sabbath. And I have to say to you right now, if you're listening, that is something that the church has taught you. Ask them to show you anywhere in Scripture where it says that scriptural lunar Hebrew Sabbath is no longer kept, and Sunday is now the actual Sabbath. And no one has ever been able to show me a scripture that says that.
Right. Or even Saturday.
Or even Saturday. And again, they want to glue it to the Gregorian calendar.
Right.
Well, if you glue it to the Gregorian calendar, where do you hold New Moon Sabbath? So you can't do that.
Right.
You've got New Moon Sabbath, and then you try to hold that doesn't work because the moon moves around on the Gregorian calendar. I mean,
Yes.
on the on the Hebrew calendar it doesn't, but when you try to match them up, if anybody out there is confused, again, go to our website and freely download the book, The Destruction of Sabbath. There's a link right there, and every aspect of this will be explained in detail, because this is going to be a lot for people to swallow right up front. It really is, number one. And number two, you might not understand just how important what Zen and I are talking about is. So please go and download.
Yes, and it's freely available. And also, according to the Gregorian calendar, the way that the calendar has given us to us by God, based on the lunar phases and movements of the moon, it's Sabbath can fall on any day of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or
Right,
Sunday.
right. Which is actually important because each of the days of the week was named after a god.
Right.
So in the old days, it was considered whichever day you took your Sabbath on, and all religions have these special days, that was your God's day. And that was the day of Constantine and the church back in around 300, and I'm blanking, 340 and around there. Gee, read the book, it has it in it. The church got together and they wanted to take away the power from the Jews completely, and so they made scriptural lunar Sabbath illegal, even though the church around the world, even as far away as England, kept the lunar Sabbath for the next 200 years. They, at that meeting, got together and moved the Sabbath day to Sunday, stating that it's Sunday because that's the day that Jesus rose, and so that's the new Sabbath. Now, first off, there's no anywhere in Scripture that is a holy construct of the Catholic Church. There is nowhere in Scripture stating that it should be switched over to Sunday. But let's say that you want to keep Sunday, and this is where I ask people to do a little math. If you're listening out there, nice and simple. The church claims that Sunday is the Sabbath because Jesus rose on Sunday. So let's look at Jesus' own words. He said, when his disciples were talking to him, he said, 3 days, 3 nights, I'll be in the belly of the earth. Now that's very specific and very factual, actually, because he was in a cave, which the word belly could also be translated as cave if the Hebrew was done right.
Hold
Okay?
on, Chris. We'll be right
We'll
back
do it
with the
when we
final
get
segment. Welcome back for final segment, everybody. Have as guests with me Christopher Tyreman of the Chronicle Project. I just wanted to address a couple things that Sam Squatch has said in the chat room. Just wanted to read this real quick. He says, but why would you want to follow a self-styled creator who wants to apparently enslave everybody to help them? And then again, why does the Jewish religion represent or origination when there are much older religions? Just from my own study, and those of you that have followed my work, that I was involved in the New Age for 20 years, and that I had studied all the Sumerian teachings and all of the other, as far as the pagan religions before being brought full circle back to the scripture. But in my own experience, I have found that a lot of what the pagans worship or the things that they involve themselves with, as far as their belief in God, whether you think that that's the Anunnaki or the ancient aliens or the Nephilim or the pagan gods of the Greek and Roman, the pantheon of gods and goddesses, any of them, what I have come to know is that they represent what Enoch speaks about as the rebel angels and the fallen watchers. And this is, again, my opinion. And that the worship of the Nakash as the feathered serpent, the guardian of the tree of the knowledge and good and evil, that all the olden religions, those that predate um, Christianity, if that's what you want to call it, even though it's my belief that Christianity goes back even further than the flood, and that a lot of what we have now is just scriptures that were written post flood, things such as the Sumerian teachings, all the cuneiform texts, and that even my work with the Thracian Chronicles um, proves that Christianity predated the Sumerian teachings by 1,500 years, and it's my opinion again that it goes back even way further, to Adam, going back even a lot further than the flood of Noah's day, and that the deluge wiped out so much of what was then, cities and scriptures and writings and ancient teachings and all that. But anyways, again, what I've learned as far as the pagans, uh, the religions, and the idolatry that preceded the so-called Christianity is that they were deceived into worshiping, just as it says in Revelation 12, worshiping that ancient dragon, that old serpent known as the devil and Satan, who deceiveth the whole world. And that this is the basis for most pagan and idolatrous religions, and that the only one that really follows and worships the creator. And when I say creator, I mean the creator of heavens and earth, um, and that he's the one that made us and all things that we can even see, and that all of the others may be worshiping the his angels, the rebel angels or the watcher angels, that are masquerading, acting as if they are gods themselves. And the reason I know this is because the Bible is prophetic, and it has forecasted events going thousands of years into the future, and has even predicted and prophesied things that are occurring right now. In fact, most of the prophecies were written for our day and age, as being the last generation, the fig tree generation, and that we are, in my opinion, again, living in the end of days. And so that's why I trust the scriptures, um, not only for its prophetic nature, but also like the things with the involvement with the Bible code, which is a whole nother area of, uh, you know, divinely inspired, in my opinion, divinely inspired, that cannot be replicated, and which cannot even, it would never have even come to light without the use of computers and software that was written to find and locate, this equal distance letter sequencing. But anyways, let me get you to comment, Chris, and then if you would go back into um, what you were talking about before we got to break.
Sure. Sam, what was the person's name?
Sam Squatch.
Sam Squatch. Good name. I live in Canada. We have Sam Squatches all over the place. Um, in answer to your question, and it is a good question, and I'll tell you something we found when we SDH'd the first 15 chapters of Genesis. I was fascinated over and over by how many times there was a scripture or a text written which made Creator or the people following him, such as Abram or Noah, look like very unpleasant, nasty people who would do horrible things. But when we restored the words correctly, it was the inverse. And so it became apparent that whoever is in charge of the system, the way it's going right now, and the translations of the Bible and the way that the Hebrew translation is told to be done, these people have specifically designed the system to make sure that the translations paint Creator in a horrible light and his people in a horrible light on purpose, to make sure that people like you will ask that question. Why would I follow somebody like that? But if you go to our site, thechronicleproject.org, and read the restored versions, you'll be shocked at exactly how it turns around to the opposite direction. So give it a shot, see what you think. And that would be my answer to that question, because I have to admit, I felt the same way he did sometimes.
I think we all have, really.
Okay, Zen, interesting note that I want to put. So I'm sitting here with my glass, with my iced tea was there, and there was a couple of papers under it on my desk here. And I pulled out the one paper, which is one of my scribbling, and stuck to it. Is your phone number, is Zen's home phone number, and the 250 times for the show, which means that this paper, and I have no idea where it came from, was the last time that we talked regarding the last time we did a show. And
That's
somehow
funny.
it's on my desk at the bottom of my cup right now. Isn't that weird?
That is very cool.
I would have no idea where this came from. That's so weird. So anyway, where were we? Oh, yes. I'm going to make a bold claim here for people listening. If you're a Muslim, if you are a Christian, if you are a Jew, I will tell you straight up front, knowing from what we have seen, including like a lot of people, for example, if you're a Christian, you'll say, well, yes, but that's Old Testament that you guys are working on. The New Testament's perfectly fine. If you think that the New Testament is perfectly fine, what I want you to do is I want you to go look up the time of the death of Jesus, the trial and everything in John, and then do it in Mark. Get them to do that, and they're going to find out something absolutely horrifying, and that is one of them, the two of them do not compare. One of them says that Jesus was on the cross early in the morning, and the other one says at noon he was still being tried. There is a complete difference there. These scriptures have been changed. Even Matthew 28:1, it says, if you go there right now, it says, after the Sabbath, it's talking about when Jesus rose. After the Sabbath, at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. Well, guess what? It doesn't say that in the Greek. They have it on the first day of the week, which makes people think, oh, Sunday, right? What it actually says in the Greek is, on the eve of the Sabbaths, at the dawn, toward the first of the Sabbaths, came Mary the Magdalene and the other Mary. These are the kind of changes that the powers that be, those people who are making our translations right now, have made. And I will tell you, from what I've seen, and if you go to our website, you will see the mass differences, that the way that they have translated the scriptures at this time, both New Testament and Old Testament, they have changed it from our ability to serve Creator into another form of control, giving us the appearance of godliness, but lacking the power therein. Gee, I just quoted something. Because when you remove the Sabbath out of that and start changing stuff around, you no longer have the right to give Creator access to the planet, meaning the Nakash is still in charge of the planet, meaning Creator can't get us out of this mess, which is why bad things happen to good people, because he's not in control. And people don't get that. They like to blame God for everything. Where was God? Well, I'll tell you where he was. He has no legal access to the planet. Now, do you want to comment before I go on?
Yeah, I was going to say that this is also why Satan was able to take Yeshua up to and offer him all the kingdoms of this
Yes.
world
Very
if he
good.
would just bow down to him.
Yeah.
And one last comment before I turn it back over to you is that a lot of people um, speak of Yahweh Elohim, or the Most High God. They say that he's a vengeful, vindictive
Yeah.
God
Exactly.
because of his declaration to kill every man, woman, and child when Joshua went into the land of Canaan. But
Right.
what people don't realize is that the
Exactly.
the people that were in that land, they were hybrids, they were giants, they were
Yep.
also cannibals, and they offered their
Humans.
children up in sacrifice and also participated in victim sacrifice. And
You
he
betcha.
did not want his people to become tainted, like the leaven that is also
Yeah.
spoken
Well,
about. But go ahead.
he doesn't want interbreeding between non-humans because the
Exactly.
genetic material does not cross properly. And the
Exactly.
people that come out of that are really freakish. You don't want the cross. And so not only that, but he said destroy the cattle too,
Exactly. That's
because
right.
they had even been interbreeding with the cattle because Nephilim's DNA it is not there's no non-bridging like our DNA does. Their DNA can interconnect with anything because it's a megacode DNA, and so they can breed with anything they want. And the Book of Enoch talked about them sinning by interbreeding with animals of all kinds.
Yes. And
So
also
you
the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Giants spoke about the miscegenation and how everything had been corrupted, even the plants and all the animals and humanity.
according to what we had, we needed to do a show on this. According to what we restored, by the time Creator brought and it wasn't a flood, it was a tsunami, the oceans coming up over the lands and destroying everything. By the time he did that, there was no one left on the earth that was human who was savable. Like almost
Right.
everybody had been killed, eaten, starved to death, destroyed, everything. It was a mess. The whole point of the flood was not to kill the humans. It states in the restored scriptures the point of the flood was to destroy all of that which had joined the humans. See, that word ath was taken out again. So instead of destroying the humans, it's to join the humans. Wow. One word changes creator from the bad guy to the good guy.
Right. There's a passage in the second Baruch that speaks about how 409,000 giants were wiped out because of the flood.
Yeah, exactly. And there's fascinating material. We have to do a show on this because
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
okay. Let me skip back because we haven't got much time.
Right.
I want the
About
Christians
10
out there.
minutes, just so you know.
Exactly. First thing is, I want people out there, if you call yourself a Jew, well, I'm a Jew. If you call yourself a Jew or you're a Christian or you're a Muslim, stop giving yourself those names. Start calling yourself a follower of Creator. And the reason is the way that the system's been set up right now, it's been set up to make you believe you're doing something you're not. And quickly, for if you're a Christian, I'm going to do this. Jesus said 3 days, 3 nights going to be in the belly of the earth. He was very specific. He didn't say 3 days. 3 days, 3 nights. So count them. He dies. If you're using the Gregorian, and a lot of the Christians still believe that the Gregorian is how it works, he would have died Friday afternoon. So we need 3 days, 3 nights. So Friday would have been the first day. Friday night, first night. Saturday, second day. Saturday night, second night. Sunday, third day. Sunday night, third night. According to Jesus' own words, he would have had to rise on Monday
Right.
if you use the Gregorian calendar.
Right.
That alone proves to you that the Sunday thing is wholly a construct of Constantine and all of the people who got together and slapped all the books to the Bible so that they could have control over the religion. And they moved it over to his day, which is Sunday, which is Helios, the sun god,
Yes.
which was Constantine's. And people say, no, Constantine was a Christian. Oh, no, you need to do some study because if this guy was a Christian, he was still dumping money into the God's projects for buildings and everything else. He was not a Christian. He was a smart man who knew how to control things and let a little here and a little there make everybody happy. And he wanted to create a unified religion under his empire so that stuff could be controlled. And if Constantine was at all under the Nakash, then the Nakash came up with this brilliant idea. He said, we've tried to kill all these Sabbath keepers. The Jews and the Christians were all keeping Sabbath at this time. So they tried killing them all. That only made more. So they came up with a new plan. And the new plan was change the day of Sabbath. So guess what? The Muslims' day got changed, the Christians' day got changed, and the Jews' day got changed. And nobody is keeping scriptural Sabbath, which means the Creator has no access to the planet, which means the Nakash is in charge.
Right. Right. Hey, with our last bit of time, can you tell people how they can discover what the Sabbath is right now? I know you talked about it somewhat, but I want them to know for certain, because I think it's so important. So, and
I
also if you'll give out your website and
sure,
your
again,
contact
yes.
information and where people can go to find your book and stuff.
Okay. The website is the Chronicle Project, she's .org. So the chronicleproject.org. And you will find all the material on our website for free, including our book. It was a bestseller on Amazon. You can have it for free. Just go and download it. There's no way we could have covered what we needed to cover.
Right.
You need to understand that this is probably one of the most important things you will ever read, and so important that I'm going to give you that book for free. That's how much we believe in this. So we need you to hop to the website and download that book, pass it around to anybody that you want to, and it will have within it, as you've read it, Zen, all of the info that you need to understand. And if you have any more confusing, personally write me. Our contact Gmail is on the website down at the very bottom of the homepage. They can write me personally. I will answer every letter that comes. We always do, whether you hate us or not. Okay?
Excellent, brother.
Now you've got 9 minutes. You have to come up with something, Zen.
No, we've got 6 minutes remaining, and so I just want you to, with kind of final commentary, talk about what you see coming, and also things that you are working on that are important. And also, if you could tell us how much y'all have retranslated as far as you were talking about the different books that you have available at the chronicleproject.org website,
Right.
the restored, as far as the different books that are available, if you'll talk about that as well.
Sure, real quick. We have 15 chapters of Genesis done so far, and that's worth a read. It will change everything you thought you knew, will change. It will blow you away. We cracked the book of Daniel, which we can talk about some other time, and with that proved the book of Daniel was not something constructed after the fact, as a lot of experts will tell you, but the material that it showed was 100% accurate, and was written 300 years before the fall of Jerusalem, which in that at a different time. Chapter 15 is actually amazing in Genesis, and that's worth a talk too, because we found out that when Abraham, it's called the Covenant of Pieces for people who are not Jewish, when he gave him the covenant saying, I'm going to give you all these lands, and he made a covenant with him, when we translated it properly, it turned out that it was a solar eclipse. And then when we went in and historically checked, we found that on that day, at that time, was a solar eclipse, but not just a normal solar eclipse, a hybrid solar eclipse that is probably one of the most amazing eclipses that has occurred in history. And Abram would have had to be there that day in order to know it, because the swath of that eclipse was less, I think, 10 kilometers wide and lasted for 9 seconds.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing stuff. So stuff like that, go to the website, read it. We don't charge anything. We don't take donations. It's all free, and please pass it around to everybody you can.
We've got 3 minutes remaining. Can you talk about the Genesis 6? Because everybody finds that passage fascinating as far as the sons of God mating with the daughters of humanity and creating a race of giants.
Yeah, very interesting. And what's interesting is it's not the sons of God. And I know you haven't had a chance yet to go through all of our stuff, but if you get to that, and on our website it is, let me see, chapter 6. Our books, you want to go to, hold on a second here. Because what we found when we went to Genesis, it's not one book. It's actually a whole bunch of books squished together into a book. So I believe you'll want book 4, the history of Necha, which is the history of Noah, and it'll have the stuff in it. But the way that they put the wording in, and the word Ath comes in again, they were not going after. It was not the sons of God. And I'm not going to ruin it for everybody, because that way you have to go read it. It also might be, hold on a second, I'm just going to check, make sure it isn't the last thing that's said in the Scroll of Adam, which is book 3. Sorry, we're doing this with like 3 minutes left, and
Yeah,
everybody's,
you're fine.
you're killing me, you know. And
Sorry.
no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I believe it might be at the end of that one that you have to go. And so, Creator, you join the Adam and the earth. And so Creator therefore angered towards that made to join the Adam amid the earth, and so he resolved to proceed to carve out that group. And so Creator declared, wipe away what joined the Adam, which established new replications that be over the face of the ground. That infected of Adam unto the herds, unto the producers of mass offspring, unto what flies the celestials. And so what is to precede their death is about to appear, to arise and finish them. And Noah, Necha, came forth to bestow an offering to make himself visible to Creator. So,
Well, we've arrived to the end, Chris.
yeah.
Appreciate you, brother, so much. Thanks for